Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Nord Search podcast. Today I'm super excited for this episode, and I think the listeners are going to find it really interesting as well. I'm joined by Casper Sønderby, who is the co-founder and CEO of twig.energy in Copenhagen. Twig.energy have a really interesting angle on the short-term power markets. They're a fully automated trading platform and asset optimizer. And Casper has a really interesting AI machine learning background, but I'm sure Casper's the much better person I am to discuss that. But Casper, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And Casper, as we usually start, it'd be great if we could start with your really interesting background, like what you've done in your career, and then we'll lead on to Twig, if that's okay.
That's good. I'm a trained engineer, like a long time ago almost, and I actually trained as a biomedical engineer, and then afterwards worked a little bit actually in vaccine development. But then I changed topic a little bit and went into machine learning and AI and did a PhD in probabilistic machine learning and kind of caught the kind of earlier wave of deep learning. So that's back in like 2015 I did that. Then I had a startup for a little bit, like a few years. It didn't kind of scale as we hoped. And then I got an opportunity to join Google Brain. It's kind of the long-term research division in Google, and joined them as a research scientist on AI and basically like method development on AI. And actually, that was kind of interesting and very super good opportunity. But eventually, actually, I started working on after doing some more method development on AI. I worked on data-driven weather forecasting. So started that effort in Google and kind of was one of the initiators of that. And basically, we were trying to swap out kind of a physical model of the atmosphere with a machine learning based approach. So I worked 3 years on that, and of course that was kind of my entry into interest into energy, and very, very interesting. I think we had some really good early results in that, and you have actually seen recently that there's a lot of very good results coming out in that space now. But after 3 years in Google, I moved back to Copenhagen, and then I kind of took a little bit of sabbatical and thought about what I should work on. Eventually, homed in on the energy sector and how we can use software to be a part of the transitioning to a carbon neutral grid. So that's really the kind of where Twig Energy started.
Awesome. And you started that with your co-founder, who's your brother, right?
Yeah, so my brother, yeah.
And he's also got a similar background to yourself.
Yeah, he's also a technical background. He actually worked for Apple in Cupertino for a few years, and then I think COVID hit San Francisco, and then he was a little bit. I wanted to move back closer to out of lockdown and closer to family. That was really the good timing for starting a company together. That we ended up in Copenhagen at the same time.
Awesome. So you've both got this deep expertise in machine learning, or deep learning, as we call it, and AI.
Yeah, that's very much from a technical angle, right? Of course, we are learning a lot of other things now, but really the kind of what we're trained in is AI and machine learning, and it was called machine learning back then. It was actually not called AI, but.
So everything's called AI now, but it was machine learning. Interesting. Yeah. So Google Brain, is that like the research arm of Google, like for people who don't?
Yeah, so Google had kind of two long-term research divisions. So one is called Google Brain, and the other one is DeepMind Technologies. They're kind of a little bit similar, but kind of have different kind of cultures, I would say. Google Brain is this kind of sprawling, a little bit like a university, I would almost call it, with a very flat hierarchy. And DeepMind is maybe a little bit more kind of focused on some very particular topics, like AlphaFold and AlphaGo and all those methods they developed recently.
Okay. So one of the areas of research for Google Brain was weather forecasting. And then you were one of the researchers on that side.
Yeah, so actually it's kind of this amazing job where you kind of you are hired to kind of make sure that Google do not miss out on something. So actually, there was no weather forecasting effort in Google Brain when I joined, and then me and a few other people started that effort and built that team. Eventually, when I left, I think we were like 15 people working on it, right, and kind of at the level where we were like A/B testing live on Google and trying to replace other providers. And still, there's a really good team that have taken that a lot further in the last 3 years.
Awesome. So basically, they get some of the smartest people in the world in different groups and just say, go and research different areas and see what you can come up with.
At least when I was there, I kind of joined, I think, a little bit like at the pinnacle of the AI hype almost. Was really this kind of shortage of people trained in that field. So, I mean, it's just pure luck, right? Incredibly lucky to be in the field at that time. So we had this incredible amount of freedom to just do what you think is kind of interesting and will bring value to the company. And you just do that.
That's awesome. No, that does sound amazing. I was doing some research this morning. So is it MetNet? Is that what you were looking at?
That was the kind of published, like the public. Of course, we ran some more like internal models, like deploying them in Google. And
well, there's obviously a lot of people that listen to this podcast who are in this power trading space, and we all know how important weather forecasting is for power trading. Could you give like a brief summary of like what MetNet was designed for and like what it did or does?
Yeah, so I mean, basically, what it does, we were kind of targeting something that's very useful for Google primarily, which is like precipitation forecasting. So you can imagine, right, if you are trying to plan a route in Google Maps, for example, then one thing you really want to avoid is to get soaked. So we try to kind of make a really short-term like precipitation forecasting better. So that's the kind of, I mean, where we started out. And really, what you do in data-driven weather forecasting, I think is like all approaches are similar in the sense that you kind of need a belief about the state of the atmosphere. So it's kind of like pressure, temperature, humidity, and also like sun and wind, or like solar irradiation and wind, and also precipitation. And then essentially you have like ground truth, and then instead of like running a physics simulations that kind of like simulates the atmosphere's basically like the fluid dynamics of the atmosphere, you kind of take that piece out and you put in a machine learning model that tries to predict the next state of the atmosphere, like 1 hour into the future, for example. Then you run that forward multiple times, and you can then like produce 1 hour forecast, 2 hour, or like we actually ran in 2-minute intervals. So we were kind of predicting 2 minutes into the future always. So like 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes, and so forth, up to about 3 days, I think, was the in the end when I stopped. But really now they are at like a week or 10 days. But really the main benefit, I think, of this is that these machine learning models, I mean, they're incredibly flexible, but the other thing is that they are really fast to run. So you can run like a forecast in like a few milliseconds maybe. And perfectly parallelizable, so you can kind of deploy them on these kind of parallel accelerators that like people use for training deep learning models now. And that just means that compared to like a physical model that takes maybe like 6 hours to run, then you get this kind of, if you're talking short term, right, you kind of can collect data up to very like just now, and then you run your model and you immediately have your forecast. So, but for the physical model, you have to kind of stop collecting data and then run the model for 6 hours, and then starting predicting. That actually means that, like, even if you are predicting like 1 hour into the future, you are kind of working on data that's 6 or 7 hours old.
Okay, so it's faster and you're getting more accurate, like short-term prediction.
Yeah, and the other thing is that you are, I mean, we can write up the physics of the atmosphere in the case where we could kind of. That's actually not too hard to do. It's about like 7 equations, not super relatively simple. But the problem is that you cannot really compute that on a kind of granular enough level to be able to simulate it accurately. So right now, the kind of level, the most kind of high resolution models solve it at a grid that's about 1 by 1. So kind of each, then there's like a cube of 1 by 1 kilometer and then 100 meters. And you know the state of the atmosphere in that one, but everything that kind of happens at a scale that's smaller than 1 kilometer is not really resolved that well. Like for example, cloud formation, that's really like on a kind of micrometer level, and then you still need to do some kind of approximations to make the physics work out. Then you kind of do these. It's called parameter Anyway, it doesn't really matter what's called. But it's really like you make these approximations where you kind of already use a little bit of machine learning to kind of make kind of solve problems that happens at a scale smaller than your kind of grid. So you can kind of imagine you have chucked up the atmosphere into these kind of cubes that are 1 by 1 kilometer. And really, machine learning is just great at approximating stuff that we don't fully understand.
No, super interesting, because I speak to a lot of different trading houses, and they say like weather forecasting is like the big edge. Like everyone's trying to, get more accurate forecasting, because that's going to help, obviously, when it comes to trading on the short term. Super interesting. So, can we talk about the reason? So you obviously left Google, and then you started up Twig. Like, why did you decide to get into this space? Or actually, can we talk about Twig first? Then we'll do the why after that. So, who is Twig?
So, I mean, we are a power trading company, and I think what sets us apart from most other companies is that we are trying to automate power trading completely, and that's kind of the internal how we work. In terms of markets we're active in asset optimization and proprietary trading. So on the kind of asset optimization, we're active in the Nordics right now, and basically optimize batteries, flexible assets, and renewable assets in general. And we offer all services they need to go to market. And that's basically we like to get in as early as possible, so kind of be building the business plan with the asset owners, help them with the financing, and then of course after COD, then do the actual market optimization and bidding that they need. And then the other arm of the company is the proprietary trading. So there we trade for profit in Europe and the US, and we kind of like to. I think they go a little bit hand in hand in the sense that we like to enter our market with proprietary trading first, then build all our technology, kind of understand in depth the market, and then get all the operation up and running, and then afterwards we kind of follow up with the asset-backed trading and optimization.
Awesome. No, that's super interesting approach, where you do the prop trading first in a market, and then you follow suit with the asset optimization. So you're prop trading in Europe and the US on the short-term power side, and then
spot.
And then asset optimization in Nordics so far. Okay.
Yeah. So far, we're expanding into Europe on like other countries with the asset optimization. I mean, like anything that involves hardware just takes a longer time, right? From people kind of start talking about a project and you kind of develop the relationship, it usually takes like maybe 1 or 2 years, right, for them to actually go into operation. So it just takes the kind of turnover time is just slower.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So I want to get into detail in a couple of those areas, but so that's the who is Twig. So could we just also cover why did you get into this space? Like, why did you've got all this amazing expertise in machine learning or AI. Why did you decide to come into this power trading space?
I mean, of course, there's some elements of kind of just chance, but really, after I stopped working at Google, I had the kind of luxury of to be able to take some months off and just kind of think about what I would like to work on. Also had a couple of kids, and I kind of changed my perspective on many things. But I kind of had this thing that I wanted to, do something that's useful in a more broad sense than, for example, optimizing user engagement or whatever you can do with machine learning. So I had a few things I was interested in. One is kind of the major transitioning of everything into a carbon neutral economy, and the other one was more which is actually, it sounds very different, but self-driving cars was my other big kind of interest. I actually almost joined a self-driving car company, but then for family reasons ended up turning down the offer. But really, I was thinking about how to do something useful, really something I could tell my kids where I spent my time on something that kind of makes sense when I look back at it. That was the kind of major, really the why, I would say. After we started thinking about energy and energy markets, I started visiting like commodity traders and kind of also considered taking up a job at some of them. And one thing, I was super biased in this, but I mean, I think the state of AI or data adoption was fairly low, I would say, compared to what I was used to. So obviously I said I'm biased, right? Because it's my hammer is a machine learning hammer. You're looking for nails, right? But I thought that I could not see any reason for why we could not make this much more efficient by automating the whole like short-term power trading business. And I can talk about why I think that's a great idea, but really that was the starting point. So we kind of had this 3-step plan. First thing was to build a platform for fully automating short-term power trading. So it's anything less than a few days of kind of lead time.
Yeah.
And then after we have kind of done that, we wanted to do something maybe more like tangibly, like kind of more focused on the green transition or like directly impacting that. And that's really like starting to optimize assets and make sure they actually get the revenue they need. And then the third step for us is where we are. I think we are kind of well underway on these 2 steps. But then the third one is for us is basically more broadly make sure that we actually build renewable infrastructure as fast as we need. So that's, that's the more like kind of the vision of, but how do we innovate on everything around, like there's both like the optimization, but there's also how do we actually make sure that the financing works and they actually kind of have the right material for the business plans and so they actually get funded the projects. Yeah, that's the kind of what you call like maybe more a long-term goal here.
Yeah. Cool. No, it's great because it does have a real purpose. It's not just trading for profit, is it? Like you are helping the energy trading transition. I actually find similarities with why I set up just to do power trading. Obviously, completely different angle, but young kids wanted to help. I could recruit in any market, but wanted to do something that's actually helping. And also on the quantitative side, like you mentioned, like it still feels relatively early compared to the world you're from. Machine learning is, I would imagine, what the expertise you're bringing. There's not many shops out there that have that degree of sophistication on the machine learning side. I talk to shops, so I don't see many PhDs.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point because I wouldn't know actually, because one thing that also struck me when I kind of, I'm from this, maybe at least back then when I was in tech, it was very open and kind of, you publish your results and you kind of share. And then I joined this kind of try to break into this kind of maybe more like commodity world. And I mean, then maybe secrecy is your modus of operation, right? So I was also a little bit struck with kind of like how little people actually wanted to tell me. I think it kind of maybe tickles something in my mind a little bit, like why are people so secretive? For me, that's the kind of sign that that there's something going on here that maybe is not like you just need to have the right knowledge, then a lot of people can participate. So I thought it's not. I mean, if you know you do something that no one else can do, right, then you're not so afraid of sharing it. That was at least the way I thought. Maybe I was a little bit, hubris or whatever you call that, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. That is definitely, like I say, I don't see many PhDs from Apple and Google in this space. So I think you can bring a wealth of knowledge into this area. But I want to talk about the fully automated part of how you trade, because that's super interesting to me. Am I right in saying that you have no human power trader in the loop? It's 100% automated.
I mean, we have certified power traders, of course, and we follow all the requirements that you like, all the regulatory stuff you need, right? But from a kind of background point of view, I mean, we don't have a trading desk in the sense that we man a 24-hour trading desk in the same way as you like. And I mean, we man something else then that is kind of a surveillance of everything. And of course, we have all the like, the red button that you need to be able to press if things go wrong, which they luckily have not done. But really, it's like on the inside, right? We're basically purely machine learning people and proper like software engineers. That has served us well, I think. Yeah. But I think so. It's kind of culturally a different company, right, from most commodity traders. So I think some things are easier for us and some things are definitely harder. Like we are much more focused on developing software that scales and can kind of be used for many different things, right? But of course, there's a few things, right, where we really had to learn it the hard way, how you like all the maybe regulatory stuff, and there's some kind of all these things that are hard to read from a kind of a market entrance manual. Of course, we had some catching up to do there, which I think we're luckily now, like, I mean, we're up to speed on everything, right? But that was a lot of hard work where, I mean, it's always easier to write something down as a little plan on a piece of paper than actually executing it, right? Then all the details actually starts to matter a lot.
Yeah, but you're what, 4 years in now as a company? So obviously, I guess you've every day you've built all that experience of what you need to do to be able to trade in these markets. And I guess, would you say that it's much easier to do it that way around, like bring the expertise on a machine learning side and then learn the industry stuff that you need to learn?
I don't know. Honestly, right? Because I think there's merits to both approaches, right? If I should say maybe I think we have an advantage is more that we kind of focus very much on like systematic effects. So stuff that kind of like broadly affects the market. So kind of like, obviously the weather, but it could also be interconnectors or like outages and stuff like that, and prices in different zones and how people bid and all that, more like really like broad view of the market. And then we try to like have a very good model of what then happens in each market. What we don't focus on, where I think other people have been much more or like have more knowledge than we have, is more like focusing on some very particular kind of thing where something about, like, for example, the switch to France interconnect or something, and you just know in certain situation that this is kind of mispriced or like not very efficient. That's where I think you need a human can have some knowledge there, right, that we just don't know. But I think on this like systematic side, I think a computer is just the right tool, like an algorithm. And I can go into all the reasons for why I think that, but
yeah, well, I'm really interested in algorithmic trading. So if you could give like a brief overview of that. That would be cool.
Yeah, so basically we started out at the intraday markets in Europe. That's the kind of genesis of everything we have, like the company. Now we have branched out into more things, but really building a software platform that handles the real time data from the exchanges. So that's like all the order book data and more like all the weather forecasts that stream in. And then we every time we get an update, we kind of have a belief about what we think the price should be of all the contracts in Europe. So right now, I think like the kind of amount of data has been increasing a lot. Like the amount of bids and offers on the market, the amount of trades has been, I think, like almost doubling in a few years. So I think right now we receive something like 1,000 messages per second or something that we need to handle. That's really what I think our software platform does really well. It's really fast and really kind of solid from a kind of a technical point of view, that it handles all the, like, it's fast enough, and it can kind of recover from outages and these things that you struggle with in like the exchange, have like server problems and all these things. So that's really the kind of the backbone of what we do. And then we have like machine learning models that, as I predict what we believe the prices should be of all the contracts. And then if they deviate from what they are now, of course we can buy or sell. And that's very short term focused. Yeah. So intraday market like on the hour time span or something.
Yeah. So on that then, is that like high frequency trading? Would you class that as high frequency? No. What you're doing?
No, I would not call. I don't think anyone does really high frequency trading in power markets, and there's also a couple of reasons for not doing that. So traditionally, high frequency trading, right, to try to exploit kind of arbitrage between two different exchanges. And that it doesn't really exist in the power markets, because there's this shared order book in the intraday market. So everyone actually kind of targets the same order book if you use Nord Pool or Ep Spot or Ep14. But I still think we are kind of fast. I think we have the fastest platform in the market. And I mean, it's a computer, right? You can put your computer where the latency is low, and you can, I mean, we are in the microseconds, right, per update. And we spend a lot of time on that. I mean, it's also a little bit because we have some people who are interested in it and think it's kind of fun, right, to kind of tune the engine a little bit and ensure it's as fast as it can be. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's strictly necessary. It's more kind of
interesting. Yeah. So obviously you say it's not strictly necessary because of the shared order book, but what advantages do you have of running a really fast platform? And,
I think the main advantage you have, I think the main advantage is that you kind of, when you backtest your models, you actually get executed at the price you expect. Because you kind of know that there will not be anyone or very few people who would kind of be able to front run you on information. I think that's the main advantage, right, for us. So we don't have this kind of nefarious opponent who always knows something a little bit before us. Machine learning is kind of, this is kind of more like on the technical side, or like computer science side, I would say. We have spent a lot of effort on kind of making sure that it's as kind of fast and good as it can be, right? Of course, you can always go deeper on that and do like really hardware optimization and like build an FPGA build system or something. We are not there yet. It's not like I don't think it's kind of unreasonable effort on kind of making it fast, but I think we are kind of fast on execution and processing of data. And the other thing is called the modeling. Like, can you run your models fast enough and actually make your predictions? Are they like of high quality? And of course, there goes more like kind of knowledge into what type of data do you need? What type of features do you need? How do you pre-process it? How do you train it? And how do you make sure you backtest correctly? And all of that. That's really our kind of where we have a strong background, right? Both from a kind of industry experience and more like academically as well.
Yeah. So that systematic, data-driven approach to coming up with models.
Yeah.
Cool.
And you can almost feel right why we are kind of more systematic driven than some other, because to kind of pull this off, you need like some amount of data. You just need a kind of a sufficient like kind of bulk of data to make sure that you can kind of have a robust model. And if you're kind of targeting some little like quirk in some corner of the market, there's just not enough data to do it on a kind of I think machine learning based model. And that's really where humans excel, right? And I think some other people probably have done really well.
Yeah. Cool. And then obviously we mentioned about your weather background. Like, are you using your own like proprietary like weather forecasting technology?
We see AI as kind of our core piece of technology. So we build every forecast in-house. And of course, we also buy some from, there's a few good kind of forecasting providers. But that's more giving us knowledge about what everyone else believes about the forecast, right? And then we run our own weather forecast and power and price forecast. And then both are like focusing on super short term, which is kind of in the seconds, minutes, hours time scale, and also more longer term ones, so more at the kind of the day ahead kind of timings. So that's like 12 to 36 hours usually. And I mean, I think that's our kind of competitive edge and where we need to be really good. So that's all in-house. And I think, of course, you need some people who kind of are trained in doing that. And the other, I think, great thing about that is that you really know how the model was trained and what, it's more like if someone else gives you their historical forecast, right? This is what I said last year of some forecast. You never quite know if that was really what they published or if that was something else, or like if they changed something in between or something, right?
Yeah. And I suppose everyone else has it as well.
Yeah, that's also, yeah, I think that's true.
So this is in a world today where every company markets like powered by AI and they're all working with AI, but it'd be really interesting to just define like what you use AI for, and it's in-house. Like, you're building your own AI, and what do you use it for? So we've talked about weather there. So that's you're using it for forecasting, which is obviously a big competitive edge, as you mentioned. Like, is there anything else that you use AI in the business for?
I mean, I think basically everything is driven by machine learning or AI. And I mean, that's what we do, right? So we, of course, also target problems where it makes sense. So there's a couple of, on the kind of just purely forecasting, right, which is useful for many things. I mean, there's the weather part, which eventually, right, we're not super interested in weather, but, we're interested in power production, power prices. And that's more like what you derive from the weather forecast, right? So that's the one thing we focus on, right? And then, of course, on the price level, I mean, you can talk about price on many, you can forecast the day-ahead prices or the intraday prices, but really you can also, it doesn't really matter how granular you are, right? So we actually forecast all prices of all products at every update that ticks in. So it means that we kind of update our price, I think, about 100 million times per day on all power contracts. So it could be like a quarter-hour product in France at some particular point in time. So that's the kind of granularity we're working on. And of course, it takes some kind of effort on the infrastructure side to kind of make that work and be able to run your models fast enough and all that. But really, in the end of the day, right, you're interested in, as I said, power production and maybe also consumption, and then power prices, right? Can I sell is price too high, too low now? And that's both for proprietary trading, but it's also what you want to do for asset optimization, right? It's a similar thing. You want to sell at the point in time when they achieve the best profit, right? And we can go into a little bit more like, of course, if you're talking about flexible assets, there's a kind of another layer on top, but kind of market optimal.
But you're building everything in-house, is that like?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Can we talk about the multi-optimization angle that you have as arm of the business as well? Because that's obviously super interesting as well.
Yeah, so basically asset optimization, is that correct?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So I think, like as I said, we are kind of. I think I said that in introduction. We are active in the Nordics power market on asset optimization, and it's both like. Basically, we're targeting mostly assets that have flexibility, and that most assets actually do have that today. Even solar and wind have flexibility; they can kind of turn off and then kind of optimize in that way. But multi-market optimization is basically to ensure, right, that the assets owners maximize the profit by participating in all the available revenue streams. I mean, that's the kind of, so there's not kind of any magic involved in that. But of course, it's pretty hard to do in practice because basically when you have an asset, you can so there's the power markets like the day ahead and the spot markets and the intraday market you can participate in. But then batteries, for example, also have multiple other markets that they can participate in. So these ancillary service markets, which like primary reserves and secondary reserves, and they come in various flavors depending on exactly what country you're in. And really the problem then turns into, and you kind of have to enter these markets. You can imagine there's a day ahead auction at 12 o'clock on the day before delivery of the power. But then there's also these other markets that are like these ancillary service markets. Some of them happen like early in the morning or like at 10 o'clock. And then also some of them happen later than day ahead. And some of them will kind of be mutually exclusive. So you kind of have this, every time you have to want to make a decision, you have to have a belief about what could I earn on something else later that I can participate in later, right? And that's really the hard part, that you need to forecast your kind of expected earnings on every combination of markets you can participate in. Actually, the optimization turns out to be, once you have the forecasts and you know your operational constraints of the battery, and most of the optimization into what you should participate in is not so complex. I mean, it's a little bit complex, but not very complex. It's the linear optimization, most of it, and if we go into technical land here. But really getting the right forecast is hard.
So that's in the battery optimization space, which I know is there's so much going on there. It's probably the hottest area of power trading at the moment. Everyone's interested in that space. So you will optimize clients' assets, and so you'll take the risk, and will you do like a contract where you get a fixed price, they get a fixed price, and then you trade?
Yeah, actually, right now that's an interesting question, because right now, until now, I think pretty much everyone has done this kind of revenue share model, which is basically you kind of get a fraction of the revenue or the profit of the asset for doing the optimization. That kind of aligns you well with the asset owner, right? That if you do well, you earn more, and some do this kind of more like watermark base, so you kind of have to hit some baseline, and then above it you get like a kind of a kicker. But traditionally, actually, it has been kind of also both in Germany and the UK and also in the Nordics, there has been this kind of ancillary service market that has been very lucrative, and basically you just wanted to participate in those, and then you were doing well. And then recently, those markets are though pretty kind of shallow, I would say. They're not super deep, and they kind of they fill up pretty quickly, and that's already happened in the UK, right? But then you want to move into more like kind of a bigger markets, and that's where optimization starts to be really interesting, because then you have these primary reserves they're not really using a lot of energy. They're using a lot of like power from the battery, but they're not using a lot of energy. And then you move into energy markets where you kind of you really use your battery for like storing energy and kind of selling it back. The kind of arbitrage, like what you expect you would use a battery for, right, is charging, during midday when the sun is shining, and then offload it later. That's the kind of traditional arbitrage. But there's also kind of ancillary service markets that target that, where the market operator or the TSOs, they kind of contract you for kind of stabilizing the grid on energy. So you kind of, you sell out a little bit of energy if they like some. So there's these kind of, these kind of fast reserves, and there's kind of energy ancillary service markets, and then there's purely arbitrage where you just participate in the spot market with a battery. And kind of getting all of those to play together is and some of them can be stacked and on top of each other, and some of them will block each other, and you can get into kind of a state of charge with your battery, so you cannot do certain things. So there's this kind of interesting problem, I think, and not trivial to get right now when we have kind of all these like 5-6 different markets you can participate in. Yeah.
So how big, for a technologist like yourself, how big a technology challenge is doing the market optimization? The asset optimization?
I would say it's, there's obviously like a huge operational part of it. So kind of, making sure you So we have this kind of a little hardware box that we developed that we kind of put out at the asset, and then that then controls the asset, and we can kind of establish communication with it. That's of course, there's a lot of like stuff going on there. Like you need to encrypt, and you need to be kind of it's kind of infrastructure, right? So you need to be do proper software engineering and cybersecurity and all that stuff. That's of course technically hard, and you need to do that right. And then of course there's the more like the modeling part of it, and I think that's kind of interesting, right? Because I think it's turning out now to be pretty hard to do. You need people who are really good in forecasting, who are good in optimization, and who also have some knowledge of the power market to kind of do that right, and kind of regulation, and can, you get this 100 pages of regulation from the TSO, and they say, hey, this is what you're allowed to do. And then you have to read it, and you have to understand it, and kind of be able to participate in a kind of a discussion with the TSO on what can I do, what can I not do, and So I think it's increasingly complex from a technical point of view, and interesting. I think it's interesting, right? But it's getting harder, right?
Yeah, for sure. But what I would imagine for, let's say you're trying to win an agreement to optimize, and you tell them, we don't have any traders; it's fully automated. Because a lot of the competitors, I think they still have quite, they pitch, we've got traders, intraday traders, we know the market inside out, and we can obviously make sure you get the best returns. And then your pitch is, well, we don't have any traders, we'll just fully automate it. Do you get a bit of people? Do you get some people saying, "Oh, that sounds scary"?
Well, I mean, sure, we do get some, right, but I actually think most people buy the argument that we make, that basically I think that the argument that we pitch is that, I mean, power markets traditionally, right, has been running on this kind of maybe like hourly schedule, right? You have these hour contracts, or maybe even 4 hours, like peak or baseload contracts, and then that's kind of then you have a few like maybe like 20 contracts or like 30 contracts per country that you need to follow, which is kind of manageable. You have a little bit of trading, maybe like a few ticks per second, but then, I mean, as we kind of add more and more renewables, right, then people, there's these quarter-hour contract. That means that now there's about like 130 right contracts per zone, and also the amount of and people are bidding in smaller and smaller amounts in the intraday markets, and that's just increased the flow of information, right? And I think we are at a point now where this is very hard as a human to kind of actually track the information, react fast enough, and that's really the pitch we are trying to make. I really believe that's true, and I think it will just kind of accelerate this development. That it's just information overload for a human being, right? Either you need to have really a lot of traders that follow very few products, which is obviously expensive, and also traders. There happens to be quite a lot of churn in traders, in companies. So you need to train new ones all the time. And I think that's our advantage, is more like we build up knowledge that are kind of more stable and persistent basically in our algorithm, right? I believe that, and I think a lot of people buy that, of course. Some people take a little bit more convincing than others. But I think actually the major, maybe a more important thing is track record. Like people want, if you can show them track record, then they are, I mean, confident in you, or you can guarantee them a floor, like a price floor, for example, or something. Then that kind of makes people more confident in you.
And when we talk about track records, how would you say your track record stacks up against your competitors in the market? You don't have to give specifics, but like, how well are you performing?
I mean, obviously, I don't know the details of how everyone else is performing. So actually, the UK is the only one where you can see how everyone is performing. You can actually not see that in the Nordics or in Europe in general. I mean, I think we do well, and I mean, we're constantly improving our algorithm, and that just kind of, it just incrementally get better all the time. That's just building knowledge in the system. And I can see we win contracts, right? So I think I take that as a kind of a token that we have something to offer that's interesting for people.
Yeah. And obviously you're in the Nordics. When's the plan to get into Germany and other markets?
Yeah, so I think we are about to enter the Eastern Europe, more like Baltics area, and then also Netherlands and Belgium.
Okay, cool.
As the kind of next steps, and I think that will happen in within a few months for the Eastern Europe, and then probably within this year for the other markets. It's also, I mean, we need partners, right, who have assets that are deployed and ready to operate, right, and that's of course takes some time. I think Germany is also very interesting, right? It's the biggest market in Europe. Of course, there's some really great players there as well, right? So obviously, we're also focusing on where we think we have a customer base, and that are kind of it depends a lot on that we have some partners that want to expand into areas that we can then kind of make the entrance for them, basically.
Yeah. So it's customer driven.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah.
the strategy. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Could we talk about Twig's culture and values? Go into that for people that think, oh my God, this sounds so interesting, I want to join. Like, could we talk a little bit more about that?
We are a commodity in the energy business, right? So we are in from the outside, we're delivering like commodity services and like energy trading services. I would call from the inside, we are much more like a tech company on how we operate. So I think something like 80% of our people have like tech background, computer science or machine learning. So it's kind of, I think, builds a little bit like a different culture. I would say from kind of values, I mean, we are building a single piece of software, right, that can do things we need, and that can only be done by a great team. So we rely on much more on teamwork, I think, and very skilled people to build on that kind of common project. And that just means that you have I think we have a very high focus on actually having a well-functioning team and people who are able to participate in that, right? I think we don't have this thing where you have this kind of a great human being that sits in front of a screen and run their own book and all that. That's probably the opposite of the strategy we are following. And that's just because we are a software company, right? From kind of an operational point of view. So that's a kind of, I would say, how we feel, and so the teamwork is super high, right? And also I think we have an advantage that you have as a startup. You have many disadvantages, but one of them is that you start from a blank. One kind of advantage is that you start from a blank sheet of paper, right? So we run a modern tech stack, and it's solely focused on the things we want to do. So it's developed for that, and that just means that it like we can do daily deployment of our like updates. We can like have extensive testing and monitoring and all the things you have in a kind of a technology company. Just it was built from the start that way, right? So that kind of makes it. If I should maybe go into more like values, I mean, that's of course a little bit more like where it starts to be a little bit more inspirational, I would call, right, almost. But I think we are ambitious, right? I mean, I have this thing that we want to make a little mark in the universe, right? If we can, at least that's what we should aim for. I think climate change is our generational problem, and we want to have aim for having a sizable impact on that if we can. So that's a kind of one way of. So even though you're kind of maybe more like, I would say maybe soft in a way on the culture, I still we're very ambitious still. So those two can still go hand in hand. And then of course, as a startup, like innovation and speed is just super crucial, right? So we try everything we can to make sure we are as lean as possible. And that's a value. Like everything we don't need, we will cut it away. So that's, I think, move fast, right, is a value that many startups has, and I think we have it for a good reason. And the last one is, I think we also focus on, is basically as a company, we are in this for the long run, and we are in, this is a kind of a long-term goal and hopefully a common one. So, and I think we can only solve making the power grid carbon neutral if we collaborate. And that's both internally, like as a team, but also with our partners and with every stakeholder basically involved in this. Something we focus on. So basically making sure that, of course, we want to succeed, but I also think as a kind of like society, we want to succeed in this, or we have to succeed, right? So that's the kind of values I would call that.
So is that what you look for then when you're hiring people? So people who share that passion for helping with that renewable transition?
Yeah, I mean, we of course, like everyone else, we look for brilliant people, right? And I think we are, a company is just pretty much the sum of the people, right? So of course we look for great people. Like they have to be technically brilliant, right? Of course. And those one, of course, hard to find those people who really excel at what you're looking for. But I think on the machine learning side and the modeling, we have a pretty good, like given my background and Søren's background, and we have a pretty good handle on kind of evaluating people on that. And I think that's one advantage for us is, right, we can actually talk to an expert in machine learning and really understand if they kind of know the things we need. So that's, of course, one thing we look for. The other one is that people who can, like I said, this thing about like move fast and think big, right? And I think that one thing that kind of people who can do that or excel at that is usually people who actually excel at getting stuff done. And and I think that's just, everyone is looking for those people who can kind of move the goalpost 100 meters forward and will do that. That's of course something we look for a lot. And then the last one is, I think, teamwork, right? Like we cannot hire someone, like people can be great, but they also have to be a net positive once you kind of put them in a group. So they need to fit in right to the group, and some people fit better in some groups than others, right? And that's just the I guess the beauty of diversity in human beings, that And of course, that's important for us as well.
What things do you look for to make it clear that they can work in that team environment and operate well with you guys?
So one thing is, of course, I mean, when we do interviews, right, I think it's a little bit hard to kind of know if people will fit in well, because, I mean, obviously you cannot observe people for that long and see how they actually. So one thing is, when we interview people, I think we in general, I think very nice people, but I think we try to kind of have an honest discussion on kind of some technical topic, and also do a little bit of like pushback on some like thoughts that maybe, or like some project that our candidates build, and then like just see if we can have a kind of a good discussion on that. And of course, if we do not manage to kind of establish a good discussion in like, or like have a good discussion in 1 hour, like then probably we will not manage to have that over a long, like extended period of time. If you already can feel that you are kind of a little bit like tense or something, then of course that's probably not a good fit for anyone. So this is one thing. And the other one, I think, just for me, it's just incredibly important, especially on the technical roles, that people say when there's something they don't know. And I think that's perfectly fine. But I'm kind of like, I'm kind of technically skilled enough to kind of know when people are just like word soup, you know. Just a kind of like just kind of tell, like perfectly fine that there's something you don't know. And the kind of the worst is that someone tell you that there's something they know, and then it turns out they actually didn't, and that's just much harder to fix then.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I can imagine with like super technical people, sometimes that people don't want to admit that they don't know something, but honesty is the best policy. Like you said, just say, I don't know this thing, but I could probably pick it up pretty quickly.
I think more about that. I don't know if it's I don't actually know if technical people are worse than anyone else. Of course, it's also, I mean, to be fair to kind of candidates, right? I mean, it's also super artificial setup, right? You have during an interview, right? We try to do these we have a kind of a practical coding for our technical hires, and then we have a more like a kind of a discussion of basically like theory around like math and statistics and stuff like that. I mean, I'm kind of aware, right, that it's an artificial setup and it's stressful and it's like other things, right, that are not nice. But we have not found a kind of apart from like personal recommendations, we have not found a better way than actually doing like a series of interviews and some really practical ones. So one thing we've also focused on is like, do they really, like when we talk about machine learning, I mean, a lot of people can take like a PyTorch or like some machine learning package and build a little model and then run it. But when you start to kind of question, what is it actually you are kind of optimizing for? What's the kind of trade-off you made in that kind of loss function you use? That's also stuff we look for, right? So kind of in-depth knowledge of what are you optimizing for? Why is that a good idea in this particular setting? And what the kind of mistakes you would expect from this type of model versus another model? And it's kind of an in-depth, right, breadth of knowledge also on like statistics and machine learning.
Like you said, I think a big advantage you guys have is you're able to, in a discussion, determine the level of a machine learning expert. I guess sometimes it's hard when you don't have that big level of expertise.
I can actually tell you the reverse, also, like the kind of opposite also happens, right? We just recently hired some business developers and some financial controllers. And that's like challenging for me to hire. Like, I mean, that's super hard, honestly. Like if you hire for something where you're not an expert, that's just like really hard. And you kind of like, I really don't like to go with my gut feeling in general, but I mean, you really have to do that almost, because is it true what they tell me or is it not true, right? It's kind of like, just do not have the knowledge to kind of know, right? And that's just, or like probably, I think that's a kind of, that's just the way it is. But
absolutely. I think sometimes that's where a good headhunter can come in advantage.
I agree. I totally agree. I agree. That's totally
area.
True. Yeah, that's totally true.
Something that I want to just ask as well is, based on what you told me, I imagine the people you're hiring then don't really have much or don't need to have much energy trading background. Like you just hire, based on machine learning, aptitude, if it's a technical person, obviously ability to work in the environment that you've created. So have you seen that happen? Like you don't need them to have industry experience. You can just, if they're smart, if they know how to solve problems, if they've got the machine learning level, they'll work it out and they'll be good hires.
I think, in general, people who, we hire a lot of PhDs also. And I think one good thing about, usually, the exact topic that they kind of did was maybe not exactly what we're working on. But I think what they have learned is basically to solve problems. And they have also learned to have basically used to things that it's super hard to make things work in real life. And also most things will not work. So that's of course. And I think those people have kind of proved that they can, like, for example, do a PhD or do some really good projects and publish some super nice stuff on GitHub, for example, and done that over like an extended period of time. They have usually proved that they can kind of go like to the kind of frontier of knowledge, right, and then actually contribute a little bit to it, move our kind of knowledge of some fields forward. And I think they will just in general be good at most things, right? I don't know exactly what it is, right? But I think probably some people are just really good learning strategy, or like tenacious enough to just like keep on hammering against the wall until it breaks, I think. And those people are obviously super great to
No, absolutely.
hire, right? And on the backgrounds, of course, we run like internal training on internal training on our new hires. So we kind of bring them up to speed on how the market works and how the regulation is and all that stuff, right? So we kind of have built that knowledge in the organization now, but we more hire for the technical background, I would say. We actually looked a little bit for some quants to join, and I think maybe we will hire one at some point. I think what that allows us to do is just to kind of get like a lot of knowledge that we just do not have right now. Like for example, if we like, it's much faster to hire someone that have a knowledge of a particular market than having to learn it yourself, right? And there's pros and cons of both, right? But I think that's one thing we can do now as we are a little bit bigger.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting because like I've worked in this space in the building quantitative teams in the energy market since like 2017, and I've seen like two different types of approaches. Your approach, where it's just like, let's just hire super smart people. They don't need to know the industry. They'll do really well. And that has worked amazingly. Like one of the best hires I made for one of my clients, he had a PhD in mathematics, but he came from drone technology, like not anything to do with energy trading. And he was like one of the best hires they've ever made because he was just super smart and got it. And then I've got other clients who only want people with quants with fundamental knowledge in energy. And that, they seem to work too. But I think if you have the blend of both, I think that's also one or two hires.
I agree.
With some knowledge and then a lot of people all technically excellent. I think. I agree. To get interested.
I think a lot of it also comes back to like, I mean, we are out of the tech world, right? So I mean, our kind of network, the people we know are tech focused, and of course, if you are out of the power trading world, you know other power traders, and of course, that kind of biases your hiring. I would say on the fundamentals, I think that's kind of interesting, right? I mean, I think we kind of try to let the data speak for itself and analyze the data well. But I think I mean, it's also not, if I don't know if I can say that without being too offensive, but I mean, it's not super hard to know what the kind of underlying drivers are of the power market. I mean, it's the weather right now, right? Pretty much. Of course, it's hard to actually execute on your kind of knowledge on the weather or like the power production and actually do good forecasts, right? That's of course super hard to do and know in what regimes what matters and all of that. And that's of course challenging. But I think from a kind of very high level, I mean, there's a very few things that actually drives the power market. I mean, it's just solar and wind and temperature. And that's, and then maybe if the nuclear power plants actually work, it's also a big driver, right? But
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And then just one of the last things I want to ask you is looking ahead, looking to the future, like for Twig and maybe like the market as a whole, like what are the big things that you see in the next couple of years, 3 years?
Maybe on a kind of I really believe that we can automate everything in power trading. And I think there's a couple of other companies that are working on the same. But I think anything that's kind of less than like 2-3 days, I think we can automate that. So that's basically what we're working on. We kind of started super short term, where I think automation is kind of already now is what you should do, and then we are working towards like now entering like the more like the head time frame, and that's where we are focusing also a lot now, and then we move into the future market later, right? So that's a kind of maybe like on a kind of time scale of the markets we focus on. Then on maybe more as a company, right? We are, I think I already mentioned, right, but we're expanding geographically on the asset-backed optimization. So that's like entering new markets. So we are in the Nordics now and are active in all the markets in the Nordics, but we're entering into the Baltics and Netherlands and Belgium very soon, right? And hope to make basically like bring on a lot of customers there. And then basically like pure power trading, right? We are in the US and are expanding to cover all of the US as we speak pretty much. And then we are also actively looking at the APAC. And Japan, Japan is interesting for us, and Australia, of course, and a few other markets out there.
The next big markets everyone's looking at. But I guess what's interesting for you guys, because you're fully automated, it's the plan to do everything from Copenhagen.
Yeah, so I think, right now we have less of a problem, right, of having to man like a fully staffed power desk, like 24/7. Of course, we need someone to kind of monitor all the time, but we don't actually need, like, I would say the kind of, the monitor still, like the risk piece still needs to be live all the time, right? But the kind of actual execution, the actual hands are just automated away. And of course, that makes it easier for us to only have a single office right now. So I can see like a lot of our colleagues in other companies, they open like offices in Singapore or in Australia or Japan, right? And I think due to the time difference, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm helping quite a few clients now open up offices in those areas. I guess it's an advantage for you that it's a lot of time and operational headaches to do that, and if you can do everything just in one office efficiently, that's going to be a big advantage.
I think you can keep a little bit more like lean.
For you.
Yeah, you can keep more lean, right? I think that's of course an advantage. But I think there's really a lot of advantages into having people at the same location. They can kind of chat with each other, like kind of develop ideas. And I think most ideas kind of just kind of grow a little bit like bottom up, and you just need people to bump into each other at the coffee machine or wherever that happens, right? It's a little bit harder, right, to do on like online on some video chat or something.
Absolutely. So you all work together in the office. That's your approach.
Yeah. So we actually, I don't know if we are like old school in that regard, but we actually prefer that people come to the office. Of course, I mean that's people can, of course, if they have they need to like have some good reason for not being in the office. Of course, it's perfectly fine if they need to go to the doctor or something. They work from home, or like they need to pick up their kids early. There's a ton of good reasons, right? But really more like the kind of like we actually prefer that people come to the office, and I think it's actually interesting. I thought a lot about this, but I kind of like the people who can work alone because they have a lot of knowledge, they can kind of work independently. Those are actually exactly the people you want to show up in the office, because they, other people rely on them and need to ask them about things, and kind of. So I think it's hard, at least in when developing something new, and you're kind of trying to push innovation forward. I think it's hard to do remote. It's a hard problem to do kind of when you do not actually sit together and can kind of use a whiteboard.
Yeah, I think it's definitely easier, isn't it? Like if you're a fast, small, agile startup, being together and collaborating every day, it's easier to do in the office than obviously
I think
hybrid.
So. I think big companies can probably maybe focus like one team on something and then put them in some specific location together, right? But we tried hybrid. I think there's the energy in the office is just better when people you actually have a group of people that kind of work together, and it just feels more like kind of you're collaborating, I think.
I always say different styles can work, but it's whatever works for you. And also, if that's your environment, then the people you're hiring will, if they want that environment, then great. If they want another environment, then it's probably not the best place to be. So it makes it more simple than hybrid sometimes, I believe. Yeah,
I think that's true. Of course, we have the issue of then we basically need to relocate people, and of course that's a little bit of a hassle. But I think we managed to attract some really good people, and also from many different countries. I think Copenhagen is a super nice place to live, so it's also attractive for people to live there.
Absolutely. So, how many members of the company do you have now, staff-wise?
So we're about 20. Now, and I mean steadily growing. But I mean we try to be, everyone will say that, right? But I mean we try to hire the great people, right? And I mean it takes a little bit of time to find the people who are like, as we talked about, like good fit and kind of can work on the things you need.
It's very impressive, that number of people for everything you're doing, actually. But I guess when you have fully automated environments, it does allow you to do more with less headcount.
Yeah, I think we only do stuff we believe we can automate. Of course, that means that we can focus on specific things, right? But I think that's the good thing, right? You develop something, you put it into production. Of course, you need to monitor it, but you don't actually need to run it, like operate it in the same way as you would on a kind of manual trading desk.
Awesome. Well, look, Casper, really appreciate your time. Love this chat. It's been super interesting, and I'm sure the audience will think it is so as well. So yeah, appreciate your time, and have an enjoyable rest of your summer.
Thank you, and thanks a lot for proposing an interview. I think it was super interesting. I mean, I have actually not done any podcast before. I think I'm actually super excited about it. Sound on the other, on the receiving end.
No, I think a lot of people are going to
how that turned out.
For sure. Thanks a lot,
Casper. I hope so. Good.